My world shattered this morning. Not with a bang, but with the chilling silence of absence. I walked into the garage, a place that used to be a comforting jumble of tools, old bikes, and boxes of memories. My mom's boxes. The ones I had carefully packed after she passed, the ones I hadn't been ready to sort through yet. They were gone, all of them. I stared at the empty space where they used to sit, neatly stacked against the far wall. A cold knot formed in my stomach. No, it couldn't be. I must be mistaken. Maybe I'd moved them. But where? And why? My mind raced, trying to grasp onto any logical explanation. But none came. The garage was cleaner than usual, almost sterile. It was too clean. My heart started to pound against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of rising panic. I walked back into the house, my steps echoing in the sudden quiet of the morning. Sarah, my wife, was in the kitchen, humming softly as she made coffee. The smell of freshly brewed beans usually comforted me, but today it just felt wrong, an insult to the chaos erupting inside me. "Sarah," I said, my voice rougher than I intended. She jumped, spilling a little coffee on the counter. "Whoa, what's wrong with you? You look like you've seen a ghost." She laughed, a light, airy sound that grated on my ears. The garage, the boxes. My mom's boxes. Where are they? The words tumbled out, urgent and accusatory. She paused, wiping the counter with a cloth. She didn't look at me. "Oh, those. Yeah, I took care of them." A cold dread seeped into my bones. Took care of them. What does that mean? I tried to keep my voice steady, but it was cracking at the edges. She finally turned, a faint frown on her face. "Well, you hadn't touched them in months. Years, really. They were just clutter. Taking up space. I figured it was time to let go." She gestured vaguely with the cloth. "So, I threw them out." The words hit me like a physical blow. Threw them out. My mom's life packed into those boxes, gone, just like that. My breath hitched in my throat. "You threw them out? All of them?" She nodded, a slight shrug. "Yeah, I called the city for a bulk pickup. They came yesterday morning. Everything's gone." She smiled faintly, a little proud. "Now we have so much more space. We could even get a workbench like you always wanted." I didn't hear her. My mind was reeling. A workbench? Space? She didn't understand. She couldn't possibly understand. It wasn't just old clothes or dusty trinkets. It was my mother's legacy. It was the last tangible pieces of. And then a memory, cold and clear as ice, pierced through the fog of my shop. My mother's voice, a few weeks before she died, frail but firm. "Jake, I put the deed in that small wooden box, the one with the carving of the bird. Make sure you keep it safe. It's important." The small wooden box. The carved bird. It was in the biggest of the boxes, nestled among her old letters and photo album. I had meant to get it out, to put it in our safe deposit box, but life had gotten in the way, grief had gotten in the way. And now, Sarah, I choked out, my voice barely a whisper. "The deed." The deed to the house, it was in there. Her eyes widened slightly, a flicker of confusion, then dismissiveness. What deed? Why would the deed be in a box of old junk? "Because that's where she told me she put it," I roared, the pent-up shock and grief and terror finally exploding. "That's where she always kept important papers. In that wooden box. In those boxes you just threw out." The color drained from her face, her smile vanished. She looked at me, truly looked at me. for the first time that morning and saw the raw agony etched on my features. Coffee cup slipped from her fingers, shattering on the tile floor, sending shards and dark liquid splattering across the pristine white. Neither of us flinched. The sound was deafening in the sudden silence. "The house deed?" she repeated, her voice small, a fragile echo of her earlier casualness. "Our house." My voice was shaking, trembling with an anger so profound it felt like it would tear me apart from the inside. "It was in those boxes. The ones you just threw into the garbage." A single tear rolled down her cheek, but it wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. It was too late for tears. The house, my mother's legacy, our home. It was gone. Into the trash. And it was her fault, all of it. I stared at her, the woman I had promised to spend my life with, and in that moment, all I felt was a cold, desolate emptiness. The world truly had shattered. And I had no idea how to pick up the pieces. Sarah stood there, frozen, her face pale, the broken coffee cup forgotten at her feet. She looked like a deer caught in headlights, utterly lost. But her shock didn't erase the burning, fiery rage that had erupted inside me. "How could you?" I finally managed to say, my voice hoarse from the strain. "How could you do something like this? Without even asking me? Without checking?" She finally found her voice, a weak, trembling whisper. I didn't know, Jake. I swear I didn't know. I thought it was just old stuff. Memorabilia. You said you'd get to it someday, but it just sat there gathering dust. It was taking up so much space. Space? I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. You prioritize space over my mother's entire life. Over the legal document that proves we own this house. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. Did it ever occur to you that maybe, just maybe, some of those boxes might contain things that were actually important? Her chin trembled. "I just thought you were having trouble letting go. And it was so much clutter. We talked about decluttering. I thought I was helping." Helping? I practically screamed the word. "You weren't helping, Sarah. You were destroying. You destroyed the last tangible connection I had to my mother. And now you've put our entire future in jeopardy." My voice cracked with raw emotion. "How could you be so thoughtless, so careless?" Tears welled up in her eyes, finally spilling over and streaming down her face. "I am sorry, Jake. I am so sorry. I truly had no idea. If I had known, even for a second, I never would have touched them." She took a step towards me, her hand outstretched, but I recoiled. Thought of her touch, after what she had done, filled me with a sickening revulsion. "No," I said, my voice dangerously low. "Sorry isn't going to fix this. Sorry isn't going to get that deed back. Do you even understand what this means?" She shook her head, still sobbing. "Number, tell me. What does it mean?" "It means we might not own this house anymore," I explained, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "It means proving ownership without that deed is going to be a nightmare. Years of legal battles, endless money, and still no guarantee. It means everything she built, everything she left for me, could be gone. Because you decided to do some spring cleaning in the garage without a single thought." The accusation hung heavy in the air between us. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken blame and irreparable damage. This wasn't just about a lost paper. It was about trust shattered, respect violated, and the sheer thoughtlessness that had ripped a gaping hole in my life. I remembered my mother, frail in her hospital bed, her eyes sparkling with a faint light when she spoke of the house. "Always been home, Jake. Generations of our family have walked these halls. Make sure it stays in the family." It's yours now, my boy. Keep it safe. I had promised her. I had sworn to her. And now that promise felt like dust in my hands. Why were they even in the garage anyway? Sarah asked, her voice still shaky, but a hint of defensiveness creeping in. Why didn't you put the deed in a safe place from the start? Because I was grieving, Sarah, I exploded again, the anger consuming me. Because I just lost my mother. Because I was overwhelmed and trying to pick up the pieces of my life, and sorting through her entire existence wasn't my top priority. And even if it was, those were my mother's things. Not yours to unilaterally decide what was trash and what wasn't. Her face crumpled. I just wanted to help you move on, to clear the clutter, to give you a fresh start. This isn't a fresh start, Sarah, I said, my voice flat, devoid of all emotion now. This is a disaster. This is a nightmare, and I don't know how we're going to get out of it. I turned away from her, unable to look at her tears or her feigned innocence. The smell of coffee, mingled with the faint scent of my mother's old things that used to linger in the garage, now just a painful phantom limb. I walked out of the kitchen past the shattered mug and into the living room, collapsing onto the couch. My head was spinning. The house felt colder, emptier. It wasn't a home anymore. It was a ticking time bomb. And I had no idea how to defuse it. The initial shock faded, replaced by a desperate churning need to act. I couldn't just sit there. The deed, the house, my mother's legacy, it couldn't just be gone. There had to be a way. When did they pick it up? I asked, my voice a strained whisper from the living room. Sarah, still in the kitchen, must have heard me, because she appeared in the doorway, her eyes red and puffy. Yesterday morning, she said, her voice barely audible. Around 9. The city's bulk waste removal. Yesterday. It had only been yesterday. That was a small sliver of hope, barely visible, but I clung to it like a drowning man to a flimsy piece of driftwood. If it was only yesterday, maybe it hadn't been processed yet. Maybe it was still at some holding facility. Okay, I said, pushing myself up from the couch. My legs felt like lead, but I forced myself to move. Okay, we need to call them right now. Do you have the number? The one you used to schedule the pickup? Sarah nodded frantically, scrambling for her phone. Her fingers fumbled with the screen. I watched her, a knot of impatience tightening in my chest. Even in this moment of crisis, I couldn't shake the bitter resentment. She was the one who had created this mess, and now she was fumbling with the solution. She finally found the number and handed the phone to me. My hand trembled as I dialed. The automated voice on the other end was maddeningly calm, listing endless options. I pressed button after button, trying to get to a live person. A person who might be able to tell me where my life savings, my inheritance, my future had gone. Finally, after what felt like an eternity on hold, a chipper voice answered. City Waste Management, how can I help you? Yes, I began, trying to sound calm, trying to hide the desperation that was tearing through me. I am calling about a bulk waste pickup from yesterday. At 123 Maple Street, I need to know where those items were taken. It's an emergency. Something incredibly valuable was accidentally thrown out. There was a pause on the other end. Sir, once items are picked up, they are processed through our sorting facility and then sent to the landfill. We do not retrieve items once they enter the waste stream. No, you don't understand, I pleaded, my voice rising. This isn't just a lost wallet. This is a house deed. The legal ownership document for my home. It was in a wooden box, inside a larger cardboard box. Please, there has to be a way to find it. The woman's tone shifted, becoming more sympathetic but no less firm. Sir, I understand this is distressing. But once a bulk pickup is completed, those materials are combined with thousands of other items. They are compressed, sorted, and then transported. It's simply not possible to search through them. They are no longer identifiable as individual items. But it was just yesterday morning. I insisted, my voice cracked. Can't have already gone to the landfill, can it? There must be a transfer station, a staging area, anything. I am truly sorry, sir. Here is nothing we can do on our end. She offered a few more condolences, but they were empty words. I thanked her mechanically and hung up the phone. My hand fell to my side, the phone feeling impossibly heavy. They said it's gone, I whispered to Sarah, my voice devoid of hope. They said it's already been processed and sent to the landfill. It's gone, Sarah gasped, clamping a hand over her mouth. Her tears started afresh. No, it can't be. They said it is, I repeated, the reality of it settling over me like a heavy shroud. My vision blurred. I could almost picture it, the wooden box, my mother's last gift, buried under tons of rotting garbage, crushed and unrecognizable. But wait, Sarah said, a desperate idea forming in her eyes. Sometimes they separate things. Recycling? Or maybe there was a donation truck too. Did they pick up recycling yesterday? My head snapped up. Recycling. Did you put anything in recycling? She shook her head. No, just the bulk pickup. But sometimes, I don't know. Maybe the workers separate things if they look salvageable. She was grasping at straws and I knew it, but I was so desperate, I'd grab onto any straw she offered. The recycling center, I muttered, my mind racing. The dump. Sit here and accept that my mother's home, my inheritance, was now rotting in a pile of trash. Get dressed, I said, my voice sharp with a renewed frantic energy. We're going to the city dump. And the recycling center, every single place those trucks could have gone, we're going to find it. Sarah looked at me. Her eyes still tear-filled, but a spark of determination now flickered there. Okay, yes, we'll find it, Jake. I promise we will. The promise felt hollow. The journey ahead felt impossible. But the alternative, doing nothing, was even more unbearable. I had to try. For my mother, for the house, for what was left of my sanity. As we drove, the silence in the car was heavy, broken only by the hum of the engine. Sarah periodically sniffled. But I kept my gaze fixed on the road, my mind replaying moments with my mother, memories that now felt impossibly precious and tragically fragile. My mom, Eleanor. She was a force of nature even in her later years. She had a laugh that could fill a room and a hug that could chase away any fear. She was practical, sometimes to a fault, but always with a deep well of love beneath her stern exterior. The house, this house, was her sanctuary. It was where she had raised me, where she had welcomed countless friends and family gatherings, where she had nurtured a sprawling garden that was the envy of the neighborhood. She bought the house in her early 20s, a small, unassuming bungalow that she slowly transformed into a warm, inviting home. She'd told me stories of scraping by, taking on extra shifts, just to pay the mortgage. Every nail, every coat of paint, every flower planted in the garden was an act of love and determination. This house wasn't just property, it was a testament to her life, her struggles, her triumphs. I remembered countless afternoons, sitting at the kitchen table, doing my homework while she baked or cooked. The smell of her famous apple pie still lingered in my mind. I remembered scraped knees, first crushes, high school graduation parties, all within these walls. This house wasn't just a structure, It was the foundation of my life. When she got sick, it was a slow, agonizing decline. We talked a lot in those final months. She'd always been meticulously organized with important papers. But in her illness, things sometimes got a little muddled. She hated the idea of a bank safe deposit box, said it felt too impersonal. She always kept important documents in a special place, often a specific box, right there in the house where she could easily get to them. "Jake," she'd said one afternoon, her voice raspy, her hand gripping mine, "I've put the house deed in that little wooden box. You know, the one I got in Mexico? The one with the bird carved on top." I knew exactly the one. It was a beautiful small box, intricately carved, a souvenir from a trip she'd taken before I was born. It's inside the big storage box, the one with all the old photo albums and my mother's letters. I want to make sure it stays safe. It's important, Jake. It's home. Don't let anyone take it. I had promised her. I had promised I would keep it safe. After she passed, I was a mess. Thought of going through her things, sorting through the remnants of her life, felt like an insurmountable task. So, I had carefully packed everything into those cardboard boxes, labeling them simply Mom's things. Told myself I'd get to them when I was stronger, when the grief wasn't a crushing weight on my chest. I knew the wooden box was in there. I just hadn't moved it yet. I hadn't been ready. And now, that procrastination, coupled with Sarah's rash decision, had come back to haunt me with a vengeance. My mother trusted me. She trusted me to protect her legacy, and I had failed. The guilt gnawed at me, sharper and more painful than any physical wound. We pulled into the sprawling, grey complex of the city's main recycling center. It was a vast, chaotic place, filled with mountains of sorted waste, plastic bottles, cardboard, glass. Forklifts zoomed by, moving huge bales of compressed materials. The air hung thick with the smell of dust and something metallic and faintly sweet, the smell of things being broken down. I parked the car, and we both got out. Sarah looked small and pale next to me. "Where do we even start?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper against the industrial hum. "I don't know," I admitted, surveying the overwhelming landscape of discarded lives. "But we have to try. Maybe it got sorted into paper. Cardboard? The idea seemed absurd. A wooden box wouldn't be sorted with cardboard. But what if the cardboard box it was in was sorted? We walked towards the main office, a small utilitarian building. Inside, a man in a fluorescent vest sat behind a counter, sipping coffee from a styrofoam cup. He looked up as we entered, his expression unenthusiastic. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice flat. "Yes," I began, launching into my practice plea. "My wife accidentally threw out a box yesterday. It contained extremely valuable personal items, including a house deed. It was a city bulk pickup. We were hoping it might have been routed here, perhaps by mistake, or if a worker saw something valuable and separated it." The man sighed, setting down his cup. "Look, I hear this kind of story every week. Folks throw out their granny's jewels or their life savings. We process thousands of tons of material every day. Once it's on the truck, it's mixed with everything else. Here is no way to find a specific box, let alone a small wooden one. And we definitely don't get house deeds here. Those would go to the landfill." My heart sank further. He wasn't even sympathetic, just tired. He'd seen it all before, and he had no answers, no solutions. "So to here is absolutely no chance?" Sarah asked, her voice cracking. He shook his head. "None. Once it's in the waste stream, it's gone. Your best bet if you still want to pursue it, would be to call the landfill directly. But they'll tell you the same thing. His words confirmed my worst fears. The recycling center was a dead end. The next stop was the landfill. The final destination. The place where hope went to die. The drive to the landfill was even grimmer. The air grew heavier, thick with the scent of decay and exhaust. As we approached, a mountain of trash rose into view, a truly horrifying monument to human consumption. Seagulls circled overhead, squawking, and heavy machinery roared, pushing and compacting the endless stream of garbage. It was a scene straight out of a nightmare, and the thought of my mother's precious wooden box, her last testament, buried somewhere beneath this putrid landscape, made my stomach churn. "This is insane," Sarah whispered, her face pale green. "We can't possibly find anything here." I knew she was right, but the stubborn, desperate part of my brain refused to give up. "We have to try," I said, my voice flat. "Even if it's just to say we did, to know there was nothing else." We pulled into the administrative building, another small, dusty office. The man behind the counter, older and even more jaded than the one at the recycling center, listened to my frantic explanation with a blank stare. "Sir," he said finally, "you are talking about a needle in a haystack. No, you are talking about a specific grain of sand in the Sahara. Once it's dumped here, it's buried. Within hours, sometimes minutes, it's compacted by dozers. We get thousands of tons of waste every day. There is absolutely no way to go through it. It's dangerous, it's unsanitary, and it's impossible." "But it's a house deed," I pleaded, my voice cracking. "My entire inheritance, my home. We need it." He just shook his head. "I understand your distress, but we simply don't allow individuals to search through the landfill. It's a liability, and it's physically impossible to find anything specific once it's here." "I am sorry." My shoulders slumped. This was it. The absolute end of the line. The final crushing blow. The house deed was gone. Forever, buried under a mountain of garbage. We drove home in a silence that was even heavier than before. It wasn't just the silence of despair. It was the silence of a chasm opening between Sarah and me. Every mile we drove away from that monstrous landfill, the chasm grew wider. The first thing I did when we got home was call a lawyer. I found one through a quick online search, specializing in property law. His name was Mr. Davies, and his voice was calm and reassuring, but his words were anything but. "Losing a deed is certainly a complication, Mr. Peterson," he said, after I'd painstakingly explained the situation, omitting Sarah's role and simply saying the box was misplaced during a cleanout. I couldn't bring myself to throw her under the bus to a stranger. Not yet. Doesn't automatically mean you lose ownership, especially if you inherited the property and have other forms of proof. A faint flicker of hope. "So, T here is a way?" "There are always ways," Mr. Davies said cautiously, "but they can be lengthy and expensive. First, we'd need to try to obtain a certified copy from the county recorder's office. If the deed was properly recorded when your mother purchased it, or when it was transferred to her name, then a copy should exist there. That's always the first step. It's the simplest and cheapest. And if it wasn't recorded properly?" I asked, my heart sinking again. My mother was meticulous, but she was also old-fashioned. And sometimes in her later years things got complicated. "Then it becomes significantly more challenging," he admitted. "We'd have to prove ownership through other means. Things like tax records, utility bills in your mother's name, mortgage statements, wills, probate documents, if she had a will that specifically named you as the heir to the house. We might even need to file a quiet title action, which is a lawsuit to establish your ownership against anyone else who might claim it. That's a long, drawn-out, and very costly process. Costly how? I asked, dreading the answer. Tens of thousands of dollars easily for a quiet title action, he said blunt. And it could take years. All the while, you'd be living in a house with potentially unclear title, which would make it impossible to sell, refinance, or even get certain types of insurance. My head was spinning. Tens of thousands. Years. The house that was supposed to be my inheritance, my security, was now a potential financial black hole. What about a will? Mr. Davies asked. Did your mother have a will that specifically mentioned the house? Yes, I said, a faint glimmer of hope. She did. I have a copy of it somewhere. It clearly states the house is left to me. That's good, he said. That's a very strong piece of evidence. It doesn't replace the deed, but it certainly helps establish your claim. Get me that, along with any other documents you can find. Tax bills, old utility statements, anything that ties your mother, and then you, to the property. He told me to gather everything, and he'd set up an in-person consultation. I hung up the phone, feeling a strange mix of relief and renewed despair. There was a path forward, but it was fraught with difficulty and potential financial ruin. And the thought of digging through old boxes, trying to find scraps of paper that proved my mother owned the house she lived in for 50 years, felt like a cruel joke. I walked back into the living room where Sarah sat, huddled on the couch, staring blankly at the wall. She looked up when I entered, her eyes full of raw remorse. "What did he say?" she whispered. "He said, it's possible," I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. "But it's going to be incredibly difficult and incredibly expensive, potentially tens of thousands of dollars, and years of legal battles." Her face crumpled. "Tens of thousands. Oh my God, Jake. I am so sorry." Her apology felt like an empty sound, a hollow echo in the vast empty space that had opened up between us. The house was no longer just a house. It was a ticking time bomb, threatening to explode our finances, our future, and what was left of our marriage. The days that followed were a living nightmare. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage. Every corner held a silent accusation. Every object seemed to mock me with its continued presence, while my mother's things, and the deed, were gone. Sarah tried to make amends. She cooked my favorite meals, offered to clean, tried to initiate conversations, but her efforts felt like hollow gestures. The anger festered inside me, a toxic sludge that poisoned every interaction. "Jake, please." She'd plead one evening as I silently ate dinner, pushing food around my plate. "Talk to me. I know I messed up. I know it was a terrible mistake, but we have to get through this together." I looked up, my eyes narrowed. Together? You think this is a together problem, Sarah? This is your problem. You are the one who threw out the deed. You are the one who acted without thinking. You are the one who put us in this impossible situation. Her face hard. My problem. It affects both of us. This is our home, Jake. And I told you, I didn't know it was in there. It was an accident. Are you seriously going to blame me for something I did unintentionally? Unintentionally careless, I shot back, my voice rising. Unintentionally disrespectful. You just decided on your own that my mother's things were trash. You decided my grieving process was taking too long. You decided. That's the problem, Sarah. You made a massive decision that impacted my life, my family's legacy, and our financial stability without a single conversation with me. I was trying to help you move on, she yelled, tears welling up in her eyes again. You were stuck in the past. Those boxes were just sitting there, a monument to your grief. I thought it was time to let go, to free up space, to clean things out. And in doing so, you tried to erase her, I retorted, slamming my hand on the table. Plates rattled. You tried to erase her memory, her presence in this house, and everything she left me. That's not fair, she cried. I loved your mother. You know I did. Why would I intentionally try to hurt you or her memory? I don't know, Sarah. I shouted, pushing my chair back and standing up. But you did. You did hurt me. And you did disrespect her. This house, this very house, is now on the line because of your thoughtless actions. I walked out of the dining room, leaving her sobbing at the table. I couldn't be in the same room as her. Not anymore. The anger was too raw, the pain too deep. Every time I looked at her, I saw the empty space in the garage, the mountain of trash at the landfill. I saw the thousands of dollars we would have to spend, the years we would have to fight, just to prove we owned the home we were living in. Sleep became impossible. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the lawyer's words, envisioning the court battles, the endless paperwork. The stress was crushing. My work started to suffer. I was distracted, irritable, unable to focus. My colleagues noticed. My boss pulled me aside. Everything okay, Jake? You seem preoccupied. Just some personal stuff, I'd mumbled, unwilling to confess the ridiculous, heartbreaking truth. How do you tell someone your wife threw out your house deed? It sounded like a bad sitcom plot, not real life. Sarah, meanwhile, seemed to swing between frantic attempts to fix things and quiet, brooding resentment. She tried to search online for lost deeds. But every forum, every article, pointed to the same grim realities the lawyer had outlined. She even tried calling the bulk waste office again, pretending to be a different person, just to see if she got a different answer. She did. One evening she came into the spare room where I had started sleeping. Jake, she said softly, standing in the doorway, I found your mother's will. It was in her old desk, in the locked drawer. I remembered her saying she kept a copy there. My heart gave a tiny lurch of something akin to hope. You found it? The original? She nodded, holding up a folded document. Yes. And it clearly states the house passes to you. That's good, I said, trying to infuse some warmth into my voice, but it came out flat. The lawyer said that's strong evidence. So, we can fix this, right? She asked, a fragile hope in her eyes. I looked at the will, then at her. It helps. It definitely helps. But it doesn't replace the deed. And it doesn't change the fact that we're still going to have to spend a lot of time and money to get this sorted. It's still going to be a nightmare. Her shoulders slumped. So, you are never going to forgive me, are you? She whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't answer. I didn't know the answer. All I knew was that every time I saw her, a fresh wave of anger washed over me, eclipsing everything else. The love, the trust, the partnership we once had. It felt buried under a mountain of garbage, just like my mother's deed. The house, our home, was now a symbol of everything that was wrong between us. Days bled into weeks, each one a slow, agonizing descent into despair. The lawyer, Mr. Davies, was working on getting certified copies of anything he could from the county, but he warned me it would take time. The waiting was agony. The tension in our house was palpable. Sarah and I spoke only when necessary. Our conversations clipped, polite, and devoid of any warmth. We were roommates, strangers haunted by a shared catastrophe. One morning, Sarah came into the living room, a strange, hesitant expression on her face. I was staring blankly at the television, not really watching, just trying to escape the thoughts churning in my mind. "Jake," she began, her voice unusually soft, "I've been going over everything, every detail, trying to remember what happened the day of the pickup." I sighed, bracing myself for another futile attempt to find a glimmer of hope when none existed. "What about it, Sarah? We called the city. We went to the recycling center. We went to the landfill. It's gone." "No, just listen," she insisted, stepping further into the room. "I remember when I called for the bulk pickup. They gave me a list of what they would take and what they wouldn't, and what could go to special places." My interest against my will was piqued. "Special places? Like what?" "Like electronics. Or clothing. And books," she said, her brow furrowing in concentration. "They said if there were books, sometimes a separate truck would come, or they'd direct you to a specific drop-off for charity donations. A spark. Tiny, barely perceptible, but a spark nonetheless. Books. Yes, and you know your mum had tons of books. Most of those boxes were full of them, weren't they?" I thought back to the boxes. Yes. My mother was an avid reader. Her house was filled with books. When I packed her things, I remembered a couple of the boxes were almost entirely books. And alongside them, often were her journals, her letters, her photo albums, and that carved wooden box nestled amongst them. "Did you tell them there were books?" I asked, leaning forward, a desperate flicker of hope in my chest. She nodded slowly. "Yes, I think I did." Or maybe they asked, and I confirmed. I remember, because they said, if it was a lot, sometimes a separate non-profit organization works with them to collect those items instead of sending them to the dump. Something about reducing waste and helping the community. "Did they give you a name?" I demanded, standing up, my heart beginning to race. "A name of an organization? A different pickup time? Anything." She pressed her fingers to her temples, concentrating hard. I can't remember the name, but I remember thinking it was nice that the books wouldn't just be thrown away. I think they said if it was mixed with other things, they'd still send the main bulk pickup truck. But if it was mostly books, a different truck might come. And I remember I said it was a mix, but a lot of books. This was it. This was the first real concrete lead we'd had. A slim chance, but a chance nonetheless. The landfill had been too final, too absolute. But a charity? A donation center? That was different. Things could get lost there, sure, but they wouldn't be compacted into oblivion. They might still exist. Think, Sarah, think. I urged, my voice tight with an unfamiliar mixture of urgency and a fragile, terrifying hope. "What did they say? Anything about the name? Was it a well-known charity? A local one?" She closed her eyes, trying to visualize the conversation. I think it might have been Goodwill or something similar. Or maybe Salvation Army. One of those big ones. And I remember they said they'd check the boxes, and if there were too many non-book items, they'd just process it as regular bulk waste. But if it was mostly books and other small donate-able items, they'd sort it. Goodwill, Salvation Army. Those were massive organizations. Finding a single box in their vast network of donation centers and warehouses would still be like finding a needle in a haystack. But it wasn't a landfill. It was a haystack of hope, not despair. "Okay," I said, my voice barely steady. "Okay, we need to call them, both of them, and any other major charities that do bulk pickups, right now." I grabbed my phone, already feeling a surge of adrenaline I hadn't felt since this nightmare began. Sarah was already dialing on her own phone, her fingers moving quickly, fueled by the same desperate hope. We were united in this for the first time in weeks. The shared crisis, this fragile glimmer of a new lead, had temporarily bridged the chasm between us. "Goodwill," I muttered, pulling up their number. "Salvation Army. And I need to ask them about their processing centers, their warehouses. Not just the stores, because those boxes wouldn't have gone straight to a store. They would have gone to a central sorting facility." This was a long shot, a monumental, ridiculous long shot. But after the soul-crushing finality of the landfill, even this slim possibility felt like a miracle. I had to try. For my mother, for her memory, for the house, and perhaps for us. The next few days became a blur of frantic phone calls and desperate road trips. Sarah and I worked together, a strange, tense team, driven by the thin thread of hope. We called every major charity organization that accepted donations in our area. Goodwill, Salvation Army, local thrift stores, even smaller community outreach programs. Each call started with the same hopeful tone, quickly deflating into familiar frustration. "Yes, we accept bulk donations, sir, but we receive thousands of items daily. Do you have a specific tracking number? A donation receipt?" "No," I'd explain patiently, for the 10th, 20th time. It was through a city bulk pickup. My wife specifically mentioned a lot of books, and we were told you might handle those separately. Some representatives were dismissive, others genuinely sympathetic, but ultimately unhelpful. "Sir, we cannot search through our entire inventory for a single box. It's simply not feasible. Items are sorted and distributed to stores or recycled very quickly." We tried describing the box. A standard moving box marked "Mom's Things," containing old books, photo albums, and a distinct, small wooden box with a carved bird. But the descriptions were too vague to be useful in the vast sea of donation. Undeterred by the phone calls, we started visiting the larger, regional sorting centers. These were massive warehouses, even bigger and more chaotic than the recycling center. Forklifts zipped around, moving towering stacks of boxes and bins filled with donated clothes, furniture, and household goods. The air was thick with the scent of old fabric and dust. We tried to explain our situation to the staff, usually a harassed-looking manager or a security guard. They'd listen with varying degrees of patience, then direct us to a customer service desk, or tell us that searching was impossible. "Sir, we have thousands of boxes come through here every day. They're processed, sorted, and shipped out to stores within 24 to 48 hours. Anything older than that is likely already on a store shelf somewhere, or even sold." The thought of someone else holding my mother's carved wooden box or flipping through her photo albums sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. Sarah, to her credit, didn't give up. She pushed through her own shame and guilt, her determination fueled by the desire to somehow undo her mistake. She printed out photos of the wooden box, searched online for other, smaller, less-known charities. One afternoon, after a particularly disheartening visit to a Salvation Army processing center an hour away, Sarah looked up from her phone. "Jake, listen to this. I found a smaller charity, Books for All, that specializes in collecting donated books and redistributing them to schools and libraries, and they sometimes partner with the city for bulk pickups specifically for book-heavy loads." My heart skipped a beat. Books for All? Did the city representative mention them? "No, but it fits the description," she said, her voice filled with a renewed energy. "They have a warehouse not far from here, just on the other side of the city. Their website says they also accept general household items if they're included with large book donations." This was it. This felt like the most promising lead yet. It was specific. It was logical. We drove immediately. The books for our warehouse were smaller, less industrial than the others, but still overwhelming. Rows upon rows of towering bookshelves filled with donated books, stretched as far as the eye could see. There was a dedicated sorting area where volunteers meticulously went through boxes, separating books by genre and condition. A kind-faced woman with tired eyes, probably the manager, listened to our story. Her name was Maria. Unlike the others, she didn't immediately dismiss us. A wooden box with a bird carving, she mused, tapping her chin, and old photographs, letters. My breath hitched. Yes, exactly. We do get a lot of sentimental items, especially with estate cleanouts, she said thoughtfully. Sometimes, if things look particularly personal, we try to set them aside for a few days before they get sorted, just in case someone comes looking. We've had people accidentally donate wedding albums or important documents before. Hope surged through me, so powerful it made me lightheaded. You do? Yes, it's a policy we try to follow, she confirmed. It's rare, but it happens. Especially with things that don't look like typical book donations. Your box, if it was mixed with books, could have been flagged by a sorter. When was the pickup? She asked. 2.5 weeks ago, I said, the date feeling like a lifetime ago. Her face fell slightly. 2.5 weeks, that's a long time. Our holding period for personal items is usually only 1 week. After that, they go to our general sales area, or are recycled if they're too damaged. But let me check the log. Do you remember the date of the pickup? I told her the exact date. She walked over to a cluttered desk and opened a large ledger. Her finger traced down the pages, moving slowly. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. Sarah stood beside me, clutching my arm, her knuckles white. Here it is, Maria said, pointing to an entry. 123 Maple Street, book-heavy bulk pickup. And yes, but here is a note. Here is a note here. Mysica personal items. Unusual wooden box. The note says it was flagged by a volunteer, a Mrs. Jenkins, who thought it looked important. It was held for a week, and then, after no one claimed it, it was sent to the general household goods sorting area, before being distributed to our thrift store locations. My hopes plummeted again. Distributed to thrift stores. Which ones? There were dozens, spread across the entire state. It was another needle in a haystack. But it was a more specific haystack. Which locations? I asked, my voice strained. Maria consulted another logbook. It looks like a batch was sent to our downtown branch, and another to the suburban branch in Willow Creek. That was about 10 days ago. Downtown, Willow Creek. 2 more places to search. It wasn't lost in the landfill. It was lost in a sea of donated items. But it was still out there. Tiny, fragile possibility that kept me from completely breaking down. We had to go. We had to go now. The downtown branch of Books for All was a bustling, chaotic place, crammed with people sifting through racks of clothes and shelves of dusty trinkets. The Willow Creek branch, about an hour's drive away, was smaller, but equally packed. We split up. Sarah went to downtown. I took Willow Creek. It was a strategy born of desperation, a last-ditch attempt to cover more ground. I walked into the Willow Creek store, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The air was thick with the smell of mothballs and stale air. Rows of books filled the back of the store, but the front was a jumble of furniture, lamps, and boxes of miscellaneous household items. "Excuse me," I said to a young woman working at the front counter. "I am looking for a specific item." A box of personal belongings that might have been delivered here about 10 days ago. It would have been mixed with a large book donation. T has a specific wooden box inside it, with a carved bird on top. She blinked at me, clearly overwhelmed. Sir, we get dozens of boxes every day. We don't keep track of individual items. Everything is put out on the floor as soon as it's processed. My hopes, already stretched thin, frayed even further. So, it could be anywhere? She gestured vaguely at the overflowing shelves. Pretty much. Unless it was something really distinctive that caught someone's eye. My mother's box was distinctive. But would anyone working here recognize its importance? Or would it just be another piece of discarded junk? I started my search, systematically, trying to ignore the gnawing despair. I ran through the housewares section, rummaging through boxes of old dishes and forgotten kitchen gadgets. Nothing. Then to the small decorative items, a section filled with ceramic figurines and chipped vases. Still nothing. I made my way to the back to the book section. Maybe it was still with the books. I carefully scanned the shelves, my eyes darting over thousands of titles. My mother's books often had her faint pencil marks in the margins, or a distinctive bookmark. I saw none. An hour passed, then another. My legs ached. My eyes were burning from staring at endless shelves of other people's cast-offs. I pulled out my phone, about to call Sarah, when I heard a familiar voice. Jake, is that you? I turned. Standing near a stack of old magazines was an elderly woman. Her face wrinkled, but her eyes kind. It was Mrs. Jenkins, my mother's neighbor. The one Maria at Books for All had mentioned, the volunteer who had flagged the box. Mrs. Jenkins? I said, shocked. What are you doing here? She smiled faintly. I volunteer here a few days a week. Helps pass the time. What are you doing here, dear? You look dreadful. I am looking for a box, I blurted out, the words tumbling over each other. My mother's box, the one with the carved bird. You flagged it. It came here. Have you seen it? Her smile faltered, her eyes clouded over with a sad understanding. Oh, Jake, that box. Yes, I remember it. It felt so personal, so important. I told them to hold it, but they said after a week, if no one claimed it, it had to go out. It was put out on the floor here a few days ago, maybe early this week. I haven't seen it since. My heart plummeted. So, it's gone? It's been sold? She shook her head. Not necessarily sold. Sometimes things get moved around, or put in a different section if someone thinks it belongs there. I saw it on that table over there. She pointed to a large display table, filled with assorted odds and ends near the front of the store, a couple of days ago. It was under some old blankets. My stomach twisted. I raced to the table she indicated. It was a jumble of fabric, old picture frames, and forgotten toys. My hands trembled as I started to carefully, frantically, pull back the blankets, tossing aside a chipped ceramic lamp, a stack of worn records. Beneath a faded floral quilt, a corner of wood emerged. Dark, polished wood. My heart hammered against my ribs, a desperate, hopeful rhythm. I pulled back the quilt further. There it was, the small wooden box, intricately carved with a bird on the lid, its wings spread as if in flight. My mother's box. It was dusty, a little scuffed, but undeniably there. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't believe it. After all the despair, all the dead ends, all the crushing disappointments, it was here. I gently, reverently picked it up. It felt impossibly light, yet heavy with the weight of its contents. My fingers fumbled with the clasp. It opened easily. Inside, nestled among yellowed letters and a few old photographs, was a single, folded document. I pulled it out, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. It was thick, legal paper. I unfolded it carefully. The words swam before my eyes, but I saw them clearly. Warranty deed. And beneath it the legal description of the property and my mother's name. It was here. It was real. It was safe. A wave of dizzying relief washed over me, so potent it almost buckled my knees. Tears, hot and uncontrollable, streamed down my face. I clutched the deed to my chest, inhaling deeply, a shaky, gasping breath. Mrs. Jenkins stood watching me, a gentle smile on her face. "You found it, dear." I nodded, unable to speak, overcome by the sheer emotional force of the moment. The deed. My mother's house, our home. It was back. I had to tell Sarah. I pulled out my phone, my fingers still trembling, and dialed her number. She picked up on the second ring, her voice weary. "Any luck?" she asked, sounding defeated. "Sarah," I choked out, my voice thick with emotion. "I found it. I found the deed. It's here, in my hands." The silence on the other end stretched for a moment. Then she let out a piercing scream of pure, unadulterated relief and joy. "You did." "Oh my God, Jake, you actually found it." "Yes," I confirmed, tears still streaming. "It's real. It's here." The weight of the world, which had been pressing down on me for weeks, suddenly lifted. The house was safe. My mother's legacy was secure. But as the initial euphoria began to subside, a new question emerged, hovering like a storm cloud on the horizon. What about us? What about the damage that had been done? The words that had been said? The trust that had been shattered? The deed was found, but our marriage was still lost somewhere in the wreckage. The drive to pick up Sarah from the downtown store felt surreal. The world seemed brighter, clearer, infused with a vibrant new light. The relief was immense, intoxicating. When I saw her waiting outside, her face still pale from her own fruitless search, I parked the car and simply opened the door. She ran to me, tears streaming down her face, and threw her arms around me. I held her, the deed still clutched in my hand, and for the first time in weeks, the knot of anger in my chest began to loosen. She was sobbing, half from relief, half from genuine remorse. "Oh, Jake, I am so sorry," she choked out, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "I truly am. I thought it was gone forever. Thank God you found it." We drove home in a silence that was different now. Not heavy with unspoken blame, but filled with the echoing quiet of exhaustion and a cautious, tentative peace. The immediate crisis was over. The house was safe, but the scars remained. That evening, after carefully placing the deed in our newly acquired fireproof safe, I sat down with Sarah. The adrenaline had worn off, replaced by a profound weariness. "We need to talk," I said, my voice quiet, devoid of the earlier fury, but still firm. She nodded, her eyes red-rimmed but resolute. "I know. Sarah, what you did was incredibly careless. It was reckless. And it's almost cost us everything. This wasn't just about clutter. It was about my mother, about her memory, about the legacy she left me. And it was about trust. You made a unilateral decision that affected both of us in a massive way, without a single word to me." She flinched, but she didn't interrupt. "I understand," she whispered. "I was thoughtless. I was trying to be helpful, but I went about it entirely the wrong way. I let my own desire for a clean slate override your feelings, your grief, and your family's history. And I didn't think. I honestly didn't think anything important could be in there because I thought you would have put it somewhere safe. That's not an excuse, I know. It was my mistake and I almost ruined us. Going to take a long time to get past this, Sarah, I admitted, looking at her. Truly looking at her without the veil of anger. I was so angry, so hurt. I truly believed our marriage was over. I couldn't see a way past it. I know, she said, tears welling up again. And I don't blame you. I deserve that. All I can do is promise you it will never happen again. That I will communicate, that I will respect your boundaries, especially with things that are so deeply personal to you. And that I will do everything I can to rebuild the trust that I shattered. We talked for hours that night about communication, about boundaries, about the unspoken expectations that had simmered beneath the surface of our relationship. We talked about how my grief had made me distant, and how her attempts to fix things had only pushed me further away. It wasn't a quick fix. There was no magic wand that could erase the pain, the fear, the anger that had defined the past few weeks. The finding of the deed was a reprieve, not a resolution. It pulled us back from the brink of financial ruin, but the emotional damage was deep. It would take time and a lot of work to heal. Over the next few months, things slowly, painstakingly began to mend. I started therapy, processing my lingering grief for my mother and the trauma of almost losing the house. Sarah joined me for couples counseling. We learned to really talk about our feelings, our fears, our needs. The silence that had grown between us slowly receded, replaced by tentative conversations, then honest discussions. I still had moments of resentment, flashes of anger when I thought about how close we came to losing everything. But they were less frequent, less intense. Sarah was truly remorseful, her actions matching her words. She was more mindful, more communicative, always asking before doing anything significant in the house. The house itself, my mother's legacy, still stood. It was still home. But it felt different now. It was no longer just a symbol of comfort and inheritance. It was also a reminder of how fragile everything could be, how quickly carelessness could turn life into a nightmare. It was a reminder of the chasm that had opened between Sarah and me, and the painstaking, difficult journey we had to undertake to bridge it. The pain of the experience left a permanent mark, a deep scar on my heart and on our marriage. We found the deed, but we also found out just how close we were to losing each other. Our future was no longer certain, no longer assumed. It was something we had to consciously choose every single day to rebuild piece by painful piece. And that in itself was a heartbreaking kind of hope.